Hi everyone, this is Jenny Campagnolo here. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar session as part of our Research Skills for Library Liaison series. Thank you for your patience, and we apologise if you had difficulties logging on earlier. We've had a pretty good run in terms of technical difficulties so far, so it was bound to happen eventually. So thank you for logging back in. Today I'll be moderating today's session along with Jackie Wolstenholme from James Cook University. Jackie is the convener of the Research Support Working Party, and I'm sure most of you have met Jackie in some of our previous sessions. I'll hand over to Jackie in a moment to introduce today's presenter. Before we do that though, just a quick run through of some of the webinar rules. Apologies if you've heard these in previous sessions. So today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the QLOC YouTube channel as soon as the recording is available. Please turn your video off if you have it currently enabled, as it does tend to slow things down. Raise your hand if you'd like to use your microphone to ask a question at any time throughout today's session. We might leave questions until the end as we're already running behind time a little bit. So what we'll do is once Jodie's finished presenting, we'll come back to all of you with the opportunity to post your questions. But please post your questions throughout the session in the chat window, and Jodie, I'm sure, will address them if she can as she's going through the content. So use chat to post questions, make comments about any of the content, use it as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. And please keep your chats open to the whole room rather than having private chats throughout the session. What I'm going to do in a moment is actually post a feedback form for last week's session. If you have a chance, give us your feedback about last week's session if you were able to attend, and then at the end of today's session I'll post a new link for feedback around today's session. A quick run through of the participant tools if you haven't used these before. So just above the participant list, the list of names of people logged in today's session. Let us know how you're going using the smiley face and the options hiding underneath there. If you need to step away from your computer, just so that we know not to wait for a response. Raise your hand if you have a question, and at different stages we might ask you to give a yes or a no answer using the tick and the cross hiding underneath the tick option. So what I'll do now is hand over to Jackie to introduce today's presenter. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Jenny, and thanks everyone for staying around, and I'm sorry about the technical issues we had. So having said that, it's so disappointing because we're really lucky to have Jodie here as a presenter today. Jodie's a Senior Research Fellow at the level of Assistant Professor at the Centre of Excellence for Coral Reef Studies based at James Cook University. She's also an ARC Discovery Fellow with a DECRA Early Career Researcher Award. Jodie moved to Australia in 2011 upon being awarded an Australian Research Council Super Science Fellowship. The research program she has developed at JCU addresses coral reef fish adaptation and resilience of coral reef ecosystems to climate change. Jodie's previous research as a postdoctoral fellow at the City University of Hong Kong involved investigating the role of secondary circulatory systems during stress in fish. So Jodie earned her PhD from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where her research focused on the evolution of oxygen uptake and delivery in fishes and mechanisms used to maintain performance during stress. And as well as being a scientist and fish physiologist, Jodie is also a contributing editor and author of 3 chapters in a recently published book titled Success Strategies from Women in STEM. STEM is Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths. And the subtitle, A Portable Mentor. And last year, Jodie presented a TEDx talk. You can follow Jodie on Twitter at PhysiologyFish, and she's got further contact details in her presentation. So thanks, Jodie, and over to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around. So thanks for the nice introduction. I speak and write about networking and communication from a researcher's perspective. And it's been because of those skills that I've reached a lot of my career goals. And I feel like in a time when technology is drastically changing the pace at which we communicate and the tools that we use to do so, it's really quite crucial to take advantage of the opportunities to improve our skills. So progressing through a career in research, or climbing the ladder, so to speak, is also not a linear path. The connections I've made at critical junctures throughout my career have taken me from places like Florida, where I commenced my first research projects, to Vancouver, Canada, where I earned my PhD. Having the courage to speak with a very well-respected emeritus professor in my field landed me a postdoctoral position for a year in Hong Kong, and through strategic networking while I was still in Vancouver, I made connections with a researcher here at JCU who is now one of my good friends and collaborators. This was a step that would launch my career toward the position that I have now. Indeed, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've had while I was a student, while I was a postdoc, and into my career has been to learn from and collaborate with the experts. And the caveat that I've added is to do it in interesting places. Indeed, my networking, connections, and my ability to communicate my science on a global scale has taken me around the world, working in pristine environments, high-tech laboratories, and with some of the top scientists in my field. Establishing these connections and nurturing these relationships can be done at conferences and workshops, yes, but most is done from quite some distance, especially with me now in Australia, and occurs not once per year at conferences, but rather 24/7. And this requires me to maintain a positive online presence. Not only is this important for making the connections, as I've highlighted in my introduction, but alternative metrics, as we all know, are becoming more and more important for gauging the reach and the impact of our research findings and scientific discovery. Having a well thought out online presence helps us do our part to disseminate information, get the information, the science, the research findings out to the people that need it the most. Plus, as a researcher, I know that I'll be Googled. What do I want to come up when that happens that best depicts who I am as a professional and a leader in my field? So the way I break this down is first to think about developing a digital brand. It's important for me to distinguish the way I communicate online for my personal life and that which occurs in my profession or in my career. I think about, or I talk about with my students or other researchers, the various platforms that can be used for communication and networking, and the strengths and the weaknesses of each. And then we put it into practice. So while this seems a little crazy to have to define one of the primary tools that researchers are using today to communicate and network, defining it actually helps us put the ideas into context. Using web resources and platforms to expedite conversations and allow people to generate content and interact globally. Compare this for a moment with traditional media, where there is often a long period of time and a one-way delivery of information. Even newspapers are online now, and the comment functions allow a bi-directional flow of ideas. Today, social networks and web-based platforms are how people find out who we are and what we're doing. I really love this cartoon showing how we used to communicate, how we used to network, and how we used to share before social media. My favorite are the post-it notes that are the former Twitter down in the lower corner. So sure, some of these logos and icons will have staying power over the years, but it's important to note that some will fade and some will be replaced with others. But there are some that we can focus on for now, and they can be organized by how they function. Those that are more static places to store, find, update information, and those that are dynamic, changing constantly. Somewhat static, you might think of a researcher's website where they may have essentially a glorified version of their CV. This could also be ResearchGate or Google Scholar. both collate researchers' information, and maybe to a lesser extent LinkedIn, which can be a glorified CV as well. But there is some back and forth exchange with endorsements and sharing of papers, job posts, etc. Then we have the more dynamic, constantly changing, sometimes by the second, platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and although not as rapidly sometimes, but an individual's or a group's blog. If we discussed how researchers use each of these to communicate and network, we'd be here for a week. So I'll use examples from what my colleagues and I refer to as the big three. And the stats are there. Last year, a third of the world was using the internet, and 1.8 billion of those people were linked to social media. And there's a reason we call them the big three. Last year, there were over 230 billion Twitter accounts, and every day over 500 million tweets are sent, an average of 5,700 tweets per second. There are over a billion Facebook accounts, with 665 million people checking Facebook daily. And last year we saw 259 million LinkedIn accounts, with 2 new people signing up every second. So what that is doing is helping us share knowledge faster and further than ever before, and connecting us globally for research. This rapid, expansive, and efficient form of communicating and networking. It's essentially accelerating the pace of research, expanding the reach of expertise beyond the journal article. It's allowing us to track cutting-edge research in our fields. This is where I can find out about and forward on job, award, and grant opportunities and news. It's helping us build and maintain our network of collaborators worldwide. And it's boosting my visibility as a leader in my field and that of my colleagues as leaders in their fields. It helps researchers locate new career opportunities. And it can increase the impact of our research by bringing our findings to places that may not normally have expensive journal subscriptions, for example, or a presence at an international conference. And in some cases, such as conservation planning or resource management, these are the people that most need these data or findings. And this is also helping us develop our own communication skills, as we're doing it more often and over a multitude of platforms and styles. But social media is a tool that should complement, not replace, in-person interactions. With a couple quotes here that really solidify that point. One real meeting is better than 1,000 internet or social media words, and connections aren't complete if they're just online. So the goal is to strategically use social media to help with our communication and networking for our careers. A lot of what I've already been discussing and what I'll discuss over the next several slides comes from one of the 3 book chapters that I wrote for this book, as Jackie had mentioned in my introduction, Success Strategies from Women in STEM. So STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Particularly Chapter 8 that I wrote with my colleague, Dr. Emily Darling. I'll include all of this information at the end with some other references, but many of the examples that I'll be using from here on come from both mine and Emily's online presence, which is kind of like a brand, a digital brand, if you will. A term not strictly reserved for marketing and advertising so much anymore. Developing your brand is about the person that you want the online community to see. Your brand can draw on your core values and will inform you as to the types of social media and online platforms you can use to most effectively achieve your goals. Understanding a bit about your brand can also help you define your day-to-day use, especially as you start out. And it will help you figure out where you can be most visible and have the most impact. Also bearing in mind that your identity or brand may change a bit throughout your career. Indeed, it might be overwhelming to think about discussing these ideas around branding with a researcher. So some of the questions that I ask myself and my students in general, and before beginning to use social media to communicate our work, have to do with their brand or a researcher's brand. To give you a more tangible idea of what I mean, here are examples of our own professional online identities, as illustrated here by my website's homepage or landing page. As Jackie mentioned in the introduction, my expertise is fish physiology. I've made significant contributions to understanding the evolution of and the functional importance of maintaining performance during stress, the impact that changes in water quality and habitat degradation and climate change have on marine fishes. I'm also interested in professional development skills, scientific communication, and women and diversity in science issues. My audience includes scientists, journalists, policymakers, and the general public. My colleague, Emily, is a coral reef ecologist. She's also a conservation scientist who investigates how coral communities are changing in the face of climate change and multiple stressors. She's also interested in effective science communication, and she advocates for the use of evidence in decision making. Emily's audience is applied scientists, the media, resource managers, state and federal agencies, and policymakers. There you have two examples of how we've defined our brand and portrayed it online. And so what I'd invite you to do today and in the future is to think about the types of questions a researcher would ask themselves or their students, or questions that you would ask a researcher in order to help them effectively communicate their research. This is the first step in developing a brand or an online identity. And I might suggest thinking of keywords or short phrases, the ones that just come to mind first. So I might ask, why do you do your research? To whom is your work most important? And what is your goal in using social media of any kind or an online platform? So to put it into context, and as an example, my goals for using social media are, firstly, to educate, using it as a platform to change or broaden our understanding of the natural world, to inform basic science, policy, protected areas, thresholds, and trigger points for damage to the natural world and the organisms that are living there, to learning about information, science, but also about jobs, grants, fellowships, finding new collaborators, recruiting students. I also use social media as a tool to mentor students and advocate for women in science and diversity issues. And I also have a service component to my online platforms. It's where I connect and engage with professional societies, conservation organizations, all of which is also important for advocacy and outreach. And I want all of this to come through in how I use my online platforms and the content that I exchange. So I can bring all of this together here, for example, with my Twitter profile. And what you'll see is that my profile has a few of these keywords that I've mentioned. And of course, my background is a gorgeous fish. What is not obvious from just this snapshot, however, is who I'm following and who's following me, which takes into consideration my audience and who I want to reach. And here's Emily's. She's employed by the World Conservation Society. She thinks about coral reefs, fisheries, climate change, big data, and how to tweet about it. Developing the ideas and the keywords of your professional identity will take time and will also continue to evolve as new employment positions come up and your research interests expand. Luckily, outlining your professional identity is important at all career stages and will have many benefits beyond social media. This example here for Twitter is very simple, but having a clear professional identity comes in handy also when setting up a professional website, providing a biography when you're invited to give a seminar, writing award applications, interviewing for a job, and even for general networking. It's good to ask for feedback from friends or colleagues who know you and know your research. Find a small group of professional colleagues who are also involved in social media for their own communication and networking, and ask each other to provide feedback on the key points of your online identity. Once you've outlined your professional identity, you can move on to choosing the right tools for the audience you want to cultivate and the impact that you wish to have. So what goes into it all? First, a photo. As you saw from Emily's, a headshot's a good idea, but one of you doing your research or in your profession works well too. For my Twitter, mine is me standing on my head, but I change it around between sites and I use my professional headshot quite a bit. Next would be your online name. In most cases, it will just be your name, but not always. Depending on the platform, you can use an abbreviation of your name to save characters, or if your name is already taken. Be careful when you use punctuation that might be difficult for people to remember or to type, especially on a smartphone. And for instances like Twitter, you can get creative. So Wise Climate is the Twitter handle for Dr. Erica Wise, and she's an assistant professor in climate science. I think she gets extra bonus points for a catchy combination of both name and her field of study. Dr. Isabella Cote tweets from Red Lip Blenny, her favorite coral reef fish. And yes, she's an expert in coral reef fish. Also, it's common sense to stay away from unprofessional or offensive handles or online names. So you'll want to add some key information about yourself, your title, where you're based, and some keywords. Other links, static ones, such as links to your professional website, as I have on mine, your Google Scholar page, etc. Then it's time to think about choosing your platform. So time will probably be the first thought. Do you have long blocks of time to devote, but very few of them? Or do you want to communicate often, but in very short bursts? There's really something for everyone. Then it's important to consider, who is your audience? A select few, or is it a broad array of people and organizations? And what kind of content would you like to post? Then it's also important to consider which space you'd like to reserve for professional versus personal activity. It's important to retain space for both. There are so many platforms out there, but what can these different platforms help you achieve? Which ones should you put your effort toward? And here's where being strategic and intentional is really crucial to ensure that the time that you spend will result in your desired impact. That is, getting the right message to the right audience. So in the interest of time, I'll focus on that big three that I mentioned earlier. So Twitter is my favorite. Small messages, powerful networks. 1 in 40 scholars were using it in 2012, and I suspect this has probably doubled, if not tripled, since then. For academics, this is our global faculty lounge. Twitter makes it 7 to 10 times bigger than our actual departmental faculty circles. Messages are short, but they also have short lifespans. The key elements make searching for ideas and people very easy. Hashtags are used to identify keywords that are searchable and clickable all throughout the web. The @ symbol is used to identify people or to tag other Twitter users. And URLs can be appended, which are good for journal article altmetrics. Photos and short videos can also be attached. Your Twitter feed also becomes like your personal news feed based on who you follow and what they're tweeting about, the keywords that you use and what you post, which takes you back to the importance of your digital brand. Today, most websites also have a direct share button too, making it really simple. Just look for that little blue bird. Facebook has got to be the most familiar, the largest, lots of visual and interactive content. It's used by individuals, businesses, athletes, politicians, and scientists, and can connect us all together. Many groups and organizations now have pages, as do research labs, journals, and NGOs. Groups can be public or private, thereby controlling the audience and the content, what is posted and shared within that group. Facebook is intuitive, easy to use, and update quickly, and especially when you're comparing it to someone's personal website. Privacy settings can be personalized and controlled as well. And of course, it's highly multi-directional with the like button, commenting capacity, friending people, and even the instant message and chat functions. Facebook is also a clean, simple interface that can really draw an audience because it's multimedia friendly. But just as many pros, there are some obvious cons as well. One big complaint is that on Facebook, the quote friends that you have can be superficial. But studies show that weak ties tend to bring more new ideas, new opportunities, and contacts when you compare them to strong ties, which is important if a researcher is using Facebook for career networking and career communication. It's also important to consider the privacy and the security aspects. The default settings for Facebook are usually not as private as you may want them to be. Facebook is often hacked and viruses are possible. Advertisements are inevitable, and there is a question of ownership of material, such as photos and videos, which are all really good things to consider. Some, myself included, may find Facebook better for personal use. In addition, sometimes too much information can become a liability if you consider funding opportunities, the politics that are sometimes behind them, and other things. On the other end of the spectrum, LinkedIn is quite heavy on the professional side and takes professional networks beyond the ivory towers, so to speak. In fact, LinkedIn is the largest professional networking site today. It's used heavily for recruiting and networking. And over 89% of all recruiters are reporting that they are hiring through LinkedIn. Over 5.7 billion career searches occurred on LinkedIn alone in 2012. And LinkedIn has been noted as very good for job searches and for hiring. As I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn is more like an electronic resume or CV. Especially for jobs outside of academia, it's crucial to keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. In fact, keeping any outdated information online can be worse than no information at all. Similarly, if sending a potential employer an out-of-date resume or CV is a bad idea, and it is, then failing to maintain and update your LinkedIn profile is also a bad idea, which I admit I'm a bit guilty of right now. LinkedIn is also fantastic for collaborations and discussions. Over 200 conversations per minute are hosted on LinkedIn. This can really further your professional development and your career interests and foster a lot of collaborations. As an example, a colleague of mine here at the university connected with a collaborator via LinkedIn, and now they have together a multi-million-dollar grant doing important aquaculture research. Indeed, LinkedIn can give researcher visibility for opportunities, especially with the skills and endorsement feature. This allows colleagues to endorse or promote you for specific skills like communication, leadership, project management, just to name a few. This act can be a simple and effective way to build your professional brand. And in fact, a lot of research has gone into this. Do LinkedIn endorsements really matter? And the answer is yes. When recruiters search for prospective job candidates, profiles with more endorsements will rank higher than those with fewer endorsements. Endorsing colleagues is also a really easy and low-cost way to keep in touch with your contacts and to build your professional networks. So I've highlighted the big three. These are the big three online platforms and those that can probably provide you with the most impact in networking, communication, and career development. If you can begin with any or even all three of these platforms, you may also be interested in moving ahead of the curve on several of the up-and-coming frontiers in social media such as Reddit or Instagram. Some of these may play an important role in your field of research in the future, especially for outreach and education. The bottom line, however, is to build a foundation, then experiment, learn, and progress with the technology. Now it's time to go for it. Step 3. Choose content to post and ask yourself a couple questions. Is it relevant to my digital brand and digital identity? Is it accessible to my target audience? Then post something. I recommend a good starting place is the conversation. Share an interesting and relevant article that you just read. Retweet or repost something that someone else has posted and see what happens. Do people like it? Do they then share it themselves? Does it start a conversation or make a connection for you? Advance to posting your own content. try a link or a photo. Use some hashtags or keywords to draw people's attention. And then friend or follow some leaders, institutions, or even some organizations that are in your field. See who they follow and follow some of the same. This is something I recommend for young researchers or even students. Find someone they admire in their field and use their lists to build upon. And there are also many published lists as well. For example, the top 40 scientists to follow on Twitter. It's important to maintain your presence as well. Commit to a certain level of activity, both in content and time and frequency. This will help your network grow, especially if others can depend on you. And remember to save space for both your professional life and your personal life. For example, I use Facebook largely to communicate with friends and family, with an occasional quirky science post. But I use Twitter solely for my career and profession. No cute cat photos on Twitter for me. And finally, don't forget etiquette. There are some clear do's and don'ts when using social media to communicate for your careers. Consistency, as I just mentioned, this will help you really build your following. Although it seemingly goes without saying, being polite, nice, thoughtful, friendly, and engaging will take you far, and it's still important to remember because conversations about hot topics can really escalate. Which leads to, if you're wrong, apologize. And in some cases, you can always delete a post if you realize you're wrong or it was not appropriate or in line with your brand. Don't get political unless it's part of your brand. And there are plenty of internet trolls out there doing enough insulting. Don't join them. And finally, don't feel compelled to respond to everything. You can always choose to not engage on a particular issue. I spend a lot of time thinking about all of this, and even I'm overwhelmed from time to time. This is a fun image I found the other day that gives 11 tips for keeping up with technology. Many of these we've already touched on, but some of my favorites are number 3, grow your personal learning network and learn from them. And it's important for me to also consider number 6, choosing tech initiatives that are relevant to my students. And then especially lately, number 11, celebrate your successes and share them with others. Indeed, effective communication and networking can lead to great success and avenues to pay it forward too. And for example, I recently got to use my online platforms to celebrate winning one of the 3 L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Fellowship Prizes for Australia this year, an honor that was based on my success as a researcher, but also my leadership abilities and my capacity as a role model. Indeed, this award was a huge honor, but it also brought me on board with the Girls in Science Forum, which this year was hosted by UNSW. This provided a day of inspiration, mentoring, and connections between us and over 300 Sydney area schoolgirls with an interest in science, spanning the lowest income to the private schools, girls from all backgrounds. And now I'm linked to this program, as well as many other programs that are associated with inspiring young women, young girls, to pursue a career in the sciences, technology, engineering, and math, or the STEM fields, where women are grossly underrepresented. These girls are some of our future scientists, and they're already quite the experts in using technology to communicate, especially social media. So just give it a try. This is me. This is how to find me online, via social media, and in the flesh if you're here at JCU. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, much of the information I used to put this together today came from the 3 chapters I contributed to this book, Success Strategies from Women in STEM. This book is in our library here at JCU, but it can also be purchased in paper copy or e-reader from Elsevier, Amazon, Google, etc. So I leave you with a long list of other references that went into this talk here, and here, and finally here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. That was wonderful. And so there's Jenny applauding. That was great. And Amanda, thanks. So you've given us great tips on what we can do to promote our own profiles, but also provide advice to researchers on at our institutions on what we could be providing them advice about. So does anyone have any questions? can see Katrina's typing something. Jody's applauding. So Katrina said thanks. Jody, I've got one question, is what do you think is the way that librarians could most help you with promoting your profile and building your network?
Well, like I said, you know, this is the advice that I give young researchers, and so I think that if our experts in information dissemination, our librarians, are also on board with providing this sort of foundation for young researchers, established researchers to get going on sharing their research through online platforms and picking an appropriate online platform to do that. I think it's a great framework to start out with, and just the encouragement as well, because I think that that's also what's lacking. It can seem so overwhelming because there are so many avenues to pursue, so many options, and so if we, you know, can kind of come together and decide on a really simple strategy to present to researchers that want to get going with developing their online brand and using online platforms, and I think that's the way to go.
Thanks, Jody. And I was also thinking about if we start following the researchers at our institutions, particularly the researchers we support, and maybe tweeting about their work and even writing blog posts, things like that, that helps to get the word out there that bit further.
Absolutely, and you know, that's a big way that I develop my network, not just by talking about my own work, but talking about others' work that's happening. And it's a form of reciprocity. They'll do it about my work, and that'll get my work out to a much more broad audience than I could reach just alone. And so it really does help us expand our own networks if we can rely on our close associates to do that.
Okay, thanks, Jody. Does anyone else have any questions? We haven't got many people left, but thanks for staying around while we sorted out the problems. Okay, so, and thanks, Jody, for all the references. There's a wealth of information there that we can follow up on, and it's a topic that's new for a lot of us, so it's really, giving your perspective is really helping us to get on top of things. So I'm just seeing Jody's typing something. We'll just check if it's a thank you. Okay, yeah, great.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, mainly it's a starting point. It's a place where we can all build upon and make it our own. There's no right answer, but there's definitely some good starting tips and a foundation that we could all build on.
Okay, well, thanks, Jody. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there unless anyone's, doesn't look like anyone else is typing anything. Could we just have some applause just as an indication that people didn't have any questions? Yeah, great. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Jody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, everyone.